So you've gotten this far, you've loaded your video, you've cut it to size, you've calibrated it, you've created markers, and now you want to track. The only markers that are going to appear for tracking are the real markers. None of your virtual markers or static markers are going to appear. That's important to keep in mind. The other thing that you need to know about tracking, especially if you're doing auto tracking, is how it works. So we're going to talk about auto tracking here. There are some auto parameters: max radius, min radius. This is in pixels. These basically these are used for the old centroid method. If you go back to the centroid moment fit method, then you need to pay attention to those. If you stay with the standard one, which is actually a much better method, you will not need these. The only thing this is going to really affect in the new way is, for example, if I set this to 4, and I believe I can go 1, 2, it's going to start changing the size of what is presented here as you do your tracking. All right. So right now they look very, very large. They sort of fill that whole space. So the thing you want to think about is the search radius. Let me explain why. So I'm going to go to threshold. OpenTrack does its auto tracking in a very specific way. It looks for boundaries. So in order to do that, so this slightly stretched out image is what OpenTrack really sees. So for example, if I decrease the threshold here, I see more white space. If I increase the threshold, I don't see so much. OpenTrack is currently set up to threshold on red. All images that you see from cameras these days have 3, maybe 4 channels, 3 channels, red, green, and blue. So OpenTrack takes the red channel of the video and then basically says, all right, anything, so the range is between 0 and 255. Anything below, in this case, 165, we're going to paint that black. Anything above 165, we're going to paint as white. And then we're going to go along, and based on where you put your markers, we're going to look for boundaries. So for example, if I had a marker right in the middle of that white dot, and I had a search radius of 20, as I do here, it would go 20 to the left, 20 to the right. It would sort of start on the upper left-hand corner and go across back and forth until it found a boundary. And then it's going to start down here and go from the other side, find the other boundary, and then once it's found that boundary, it tries to find a center of that marker. Now, of course, your markers move, so it uses the previous pixel position of that marker to guess what the next pixel position is. So if you have something that's moving really fast, let's say it's moving 40 pixels per frame, so instead of here, maybe next frame it's going to be all the way over here, then you want an extremely large search radius. The trade-off is then if you have 2 markers that are very close together, you may not be able to distinguish them, and in fact you may have a very hard time doing automatic tracking. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So please do keep that in mind. If your search radius is smaller than the actual size of the marker, so for example, let's say this marker is maybe 10 pixels across. If I had a search radius of 5 pixels, that would be barely enough to contain the marker. I'd go 5 to the left, 5 to the right, so something like 10, and I may not actually be able to find that marker if it moved. So you want to make sure your search radius is larger than the marker. In most of our labs that we have published through OpenTrack, we have tried to provide these parameters for you so that you don't have to worry. So anyhow, I'm going to go with this 165. I'll click OK. And often, by the way, this is set, the threshold is set in such a way that if you have retroreflective markers on a relatively dark background, the threshold is approximately right. Now, if I start doing auto track right now, watch what happens. Oh, it didn't do anything. The reason is because I couldn't actually see the markers at the time. So what do I mean by see the markers? I can see them there right clearly. I need to see these colors in the markers. So let's go back to my start frame. There we go. So now I can see these colors. You can see that my markers have indeed shrunk to 4 pixels now that we started trying to track. And now let's try tracking. Let's see what happens. now that we can see them. So now it's going along. Now it's doing an okay job. I have a 20 pixel search radius. This is probably a little bit large for what I need. These are clearly only moving maybe a pixel or two at a time. So if your search radius is too large, you run the risk of getting some excessive bounce in your marker, some excessive noise. Right, so it's finished. If it doesn't say stop tracking, don't worry about it. If it bothers you, you can click that. But at this point, you're basically done. Now, if you are retracking data, that is, you did not finish, or let's say you've tracked part of your data. You have 20 markers, you tracked 10 of them for some reason, and it was a really hard time. At this point, you could click Save Tracks. If you have successfully tracked everything and you hit Continue, it will automatically save, except when you retrack. So if you load old data and it's not completely finished, and you hit Continue, it's not going to save whatever work. So it's good to go ahead and press that. So I'm going to click OK, Save Tracks, and then I could go Continue. There will be other help videos that help you with manual tracking and other videos that help you with some of these other options.